Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
Intane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. For those of you that are new listeners, welcome to the podcast. For those of you that are regulars, welcome back. We love seeing you here and having you here. Tani can't join us today. He's still enjoying the South Island with his adventures, which is awesome and beautiful. And as always, we start the podcast with a bit of a share. And one of my things I've been learning over the last week is I'm reading a book called Inner Engineering by Sadhguru. And I was drawn to it because, I'm delving into a different world of my life at the moment. And one of the things that he picked up or writes about there is for you to go out and do things, you've got to go inwards to find things. And that really hit hard because a lot of the times we're looking up for all these external things, but everything that we do is internal, and every choice that we make is internal, and every single thing that we do in life comes from your internal perspective. And sometimes I think about that and go, that's actually quite true. When we frame something, we frame it from our biased point of view as opposed to someone else's. So you can imagine why there's lots of clashes there, because people clash because their internals are very different, internal perception. So just something for me to think about, and for you to think about as well. To go out, you've got to go in first. Yeah. But it's not about me. As always, we scour the country, we scour the world to find people that we think are amazing. As you know, we think everyone's amazing. We think everyone's got a great story to tell. And today's guest, I'm very lucky to have them on. They're someone that I've been trying to get on for a while, but they're a very busy person. But the time of the year has meant it's really perfect timing. And also, I guess in their stage of their pathway where they are, it's actually much more holistic in the conversation we're going to have. And here's a crazy story. I was talking to this young person just before, and even though we're just connecting today, I'd actually known about them a long time ago in a different conversation, which we'll talk about in the podcast. But let's invite them on. Welcome to Bosses of Knowledge, Ronan.
Kia ora, Prajesh. Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, beautiful. Ronan, for people who know nothing about you, who are you today at this point in time, in January the 3rd, 2025?
Very specific. So, right now, as I have been for the past couple of years, I'm a medical student who just finished my third year of medical school. So, right at this moment, I'm in a bit of a relaxation phase where I've gone up north from Auckland. I've gone home to my family in Whangarei and kind of unwinding and reflecting on the past year. Um, I'm also very interested in public health advocacy and advocacy for health equity because for me, it seems natural when you're interested in medicine, you start to see that all these, the afflictions that people are faced with really come from the wider community, come from challenges people are facing in the wider society. And last but not least, as of this year, I'm basically an entrepreneur. I'm running a digital health startup, which is aiming to improve preoperative care and surgical outcomes. And so that's been a really new journey for me, somewhere I didn't expect myself to be doing at this point. But yeah, it's I'm really enjoying the process so far.
And I love that because all of them are interlinked in different ways. But and we'll get to
Exactly.
each one of those in how you got there. But the reason I ask a very specific question is because of where you are today, because we change every single day. We do different things. And if I asked this question a year ago, you'd be a whole different answer. Um, but as I said just before, before we jumped on, we spoke about how I've known about you long before we've actually had this interaction, because you identified from your school as someone that is going to be a high achiever. And how do we know that? Because your careers advisor spoke to me many years ago and said, "Hey, we have this young man here who wants to get into medical school, Auckland, Otago, overseas maybe as an option as well." But we had this great conversation about you as a young person, the options that you have. Now, the reason I asked that question, to put it into perspective, is you come from a small community and a small school. What is it like for you navigating living in a small community, and then realizing your dream of getting to medical school? And I put that into context for those of you that are not from New Zealand. Getting into medical school in New Zealand is incredibly tough. I know it's tough everywhere in the world, but in New Zealand, it's super tough because there's only two medical schools and the numbers are very, very limited.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I just almost wanted to touch on something that you said at the beginning, which, the book you're reading at the moment, you're reflecting on that inner perspective. And I think in that process of coming from a smaller town and then coming to a larger city to study, there are a couple flashpoints where you really are prompted to look at your inner perspective and have I been seeing the world differently than other people have been seeing it, or are we all going through the shared common experience? And so there were some jolting parts of growing up north in Whangarei in a smaller town and then moving to study because you're trying to wrap your mind around all the new curriculum, the stress of exams, all the new content. And then on top of that, you're having to deal with, for the first time, living outside of the home, living away from your family, moving into a brand new city you've never lived in, sorting out housing, all this admin that you probably haven't experienced before if you're just fresh out of high school. So when you're coming, from that context, you're having to deal with those two kind of baskets of issues at the same time. Um, but I think what's really comforting for me is that everyone, to some degree, is going through a whole new wave of challenges. I just yesterday was listening to the last podcast on the series where we heard from Sam, who he, comes from down south, and he was going to try to get into medical school at Otago, and different university, different starting point, but I was just getting flashbacks when I was hearing him describe some of the scenarios, walking into this room where the entire, audience of a lecture is bigger than your high school. Um, I was, completely relating to so many of the things he was saying because these are shared experiences that almost everyone going through this preclinical route, whether you end up as a pharmacist or medical imaging or dentistry, you're going to have these shared experiences. And so I think I reflected on my internal perspective. But also, it was really nice to find community with a lot of other students who are going through a lot of the same stresses. And so, probably what reduced some of the stress of moving to a new town and starting this really competitive course was just finding your people, finding. So I was at Wiper, which was basically a communal hall where everyone on my floor, several of them were also going through that pre-medical journey. And I really don't think mentally and academically, it would have really been possible without finding people who are in community with you who are going through the same things you are. So that really was a key part of that. Yeah.
And I love that there because something that I think that resonates when I read about you or hear about you is the word community. This is a big part of your life, and I'm going to take that into the context of working with refugees as well. What drove you to do that? And the reason I ask you is not a as a young person you're navigating all these things here, and yet you go out and do more for other people that just arrived in New Zealand. What drives you to do that? Where does it come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. So probably one of my biggest role models over the past couple of years is an amazing woman, a doctor called Fahema Saiyad, and she runs NFACT, which is the an organization based in Auckland, but providing some services beyond Auckland, which basically provides support to newly arrived refugees and vulnerable migrants just coming to Auckland or the suburbs around. And, she has an amazing journey herself. She was a medical doctor with Doctors Without Borders in Afghanistan before she arrived in New Zealand herself, like many decades ago. And I was just really inspired to see her journey, not just as a medical doctor, but as someone who really cared about the community, going above and beyond to, she might have settled in New Zealand herself. She might be perfectly fine where she's at, but she said, no, I'm actually going to go out of my way to help other people who are in my shoes, who are just arriving now. And so I think those kind of role models, those kind of public advocates that we can see, I'm just always so amazed by it. And it always gives me so much energy when I see people like that because, they might have their own successes, their own struggles and journeys, but when they've attained that level of success or comfort or whatever goal they wanted, they don't stop. They say, okay, now I'm going to turn around and help people around me. So for me, the stress of the first year of medical school, sorry, getting into medicine was was pretty far reaching in terms of I've always been someone who's cared about community, who's tried my best to help out those around me. And unfortunately, I feel that was totally wiped out in my first year. If I'm being fully honest, I basically stopped doing things like exercising. I stopped being out in nature. I stopped doing any community support, any volunteering, anything like that. My hobbies were basically gone, and so when all of this is wiped aside, it almost feels like a part of you is gone. And so once I did those hard yards, kind of made those sacrifices, and then I'm now into medical school. I really started going on a journey of I need to rediscover who I was and restore all those things that I always had done and always were a part of me. So it didn't feel like a new journey to start helping out at NFAC, start volunteering with youth, and then eventually joining the NFAC Board of Trustees. But it felt more like a restoration of what I always naturally wanted to do, but I had kind of lost in that academic stress of first year. So that's kind of the journey that kind of brought me to that point. Yeah.
And I love that you went back to it because I know lots of young people, and again, this is my gripe with the system in New Zealand, where that first year is just so intense that you forget about
Yeah.
you as you said before, you have to just drop who you are essentially just to get those academic grades. And some people come back to their natural being, and a lot of people don't, and then they spend many years struggle to find their identity, which they already have, but they've lost because of that. So it's really
Yes.
beautiful to hear that you would have seen in your peers as well. You know, they get into medical school, they get into other programs, and they still don't feel whole. So it's really beautiful that you have done that there. And I guess what is it like for you as you when you get that letter that says or email or whatever that happens that says, hey, dear Ronan, congratulations, you're in medical school. What is that feeling? And the reason I asked the question is because, as you said before, it was a full-on year for you in so many ways.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm just thinking back to Sam's answer as well when he had to go through that experience of being on the wait list, checking it each morning, always waiting for that email to roll in that kind of confirms that your work has paid off. Um, I mean, I'm going to be fully honest.
Yeah.
It was it was a high level of stress and it was almost like a psychological desperation where you've put in so much work over the year, kind of hinging on the hope that, oh, you don't have to do another 3 year degree and try again. You know, you put in all that work on the hope that this is the year that you really put the hours in. And so there's kind of a lot riding on it, and you kind of try and cushion your mind psychologically and think of how you're going to react if you kind of um, don't get in, and you try and think of systems in place to how to kind of move forward. So when I did open that letter and when I got that email, uh, like Sam, it was really a sense of relief first and foremost, and then shortly after that, maybe 1 or 2 days later. I was kind of, I mean, it was already in the process of happening, but I was kind of opening my mind again to who am I? What did I normally like doing? What did I normally want to do with my life and do with my free time before this whole journey of getting into medical school? Now that I have the security of being able to know, okay, when next year rolls around, I'm going to be attending at medical school. It's like, okay, what do I want to do with my life aside from that, you know? And I've always been someone who I want to do things just beyond the prescribed curriculum. I don't just want to purely sit there and study what's being fed to me, which of course is important, but I always want to do stuff beyond that and kind of have my own path as well. So after that sense of relief and happiness, and I obviously went to my family and everyone was really relieved and overjoyed. And so that was lovely. But then I started to question, okay, it's amazing that I now have the chance to really investigate what my next steps are and what I want to do with my time and who I want to help and what steps I want to take. So I think it almost felt like an opening of my mind. So it was an overall good experience, of course. Yeah.
I love that, and I love it because it segues really well into the next part. So you have the stress, the psychological stress, and desperation, as you said, because it's out of your hands now. You've done all that you can do, and now it's either a yes or a no, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But as you said before, why I think you're a really interesting human being is you're a medical student, which is busy enough as it is. But what you have done as well is I'm just going to read off some of the things that you have done, and then we can go talk about those.
Okay. Yeah.
You have been youth working group for the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. You are a working group member for Child and Youth for Global Mental Health Action Network. You've been a public health researcher. You've done perioperative research. You're a working group member of World Federation of Public Health. You're a young ambassador. You're a delegate. You're a founder. You're also recently on the Asia Pacific. All these crazy cool things you've done. And I say crazy cool because, as you said before, you're doing stuff that is beyond just a prescription. What has driven you to do all those things there in a way that's because what I'm noticing again, and the word community comes back to me all the time, is all of that is about others, not about you. Even though you're getting stuff, it's by working with others.
Um, that's an interesting question. I mean, one answer to it is kind of selfish in that I love working with others. I would feel pretty isolated if I just pursued something which was just me and a laptop and grinding at something, not really interacting with others. So automatically, just for my own self-interest, I love meeting people. I love working with people from different backgrounds and different experiences and different fields of expertise. I love being able to kind of be the student in the room sometimes and learn from someone who has a path completely different to you, but obviously has their own knowledge to share. So part of it is self-interest. And then the other part of it is I've always felt that would naturally be my purpose.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be half as fulfilling if all the work I did was, you know, purely to get myself more profit or to purely boost your career or something. So those things are obviously important in their own right, but being able to know that the time you're spending, the work you're doing is ultimately helping people. That's really a huge driver that keeps me going and it makes me feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose that I should be following. Um, when it comes to some of those examples you gave, I really think public health is a really special place in that
Yeah.
sense because often in medicine, we're so obsessed with dealing with the person in front of us, which is of course super important, but you can kind of atomize society and start looking at social problems just in the context of a single individual. And so, you know, you might look at someone who's struggling with diabetes or with different, lifestyle factors and say it's on them. They didn't eat the right food, they didn't exercise enough, they didn't basically pursue the medical advice I gave them. And you might kind of get disdain for patients. And you sometimes, unfortunately, see that in the medical field where there's people talking down to patients or, feeling like they're just not following my advice, what's wrong with them? When in reality, when you kind of zoom out and look at the community context, people are working multiple jobs. They're caring for multiple kids. They're caring for their elderly family members. They don't always have the time to pick up the right prescription or, do as much exercise as you'd like them to do. And so it's almost like how can we treat the individual in front of us unless we're trying to make a change in the whole community? So that's kind of how I see my field is how can I give medical advice or how can I aspire to improve patient care and then just neglect society? It's not just an individual problem, it's a society-wide problem. So I think that's what drove me to these more community-focused initiatives kind of pairing, and I view them as naturally complementing medicine. So to me it's kind of a no-brainer, like they go hand in hand.
And I love that because it reminds me about what my mom. My mom's a doctor as well, and whenever a patient comes
Awesome.
into patient, she's always like, she come with whatever, but she's like, yeah, but tell me about your life. We can
Yeah,
treat the symptoms, but I want to know what is going on in your world. And I find, and I was saying this to someone the other day that I find that in a lot of the Eastern worlds, when you go to a doctor, it's like going to a therapist. You are telling them everything and they have time, Whereas I said they're finding the New Zealand system that it's a 15-minute consultation and doctors are hampered by that. They just do, all right, cool, let's treat the patient, not
yeah,
the person. So
yeah,
it's really beautiful that that you've got that perspective, and I'd love to see how that changes, especially with the world now being so and I guess you've seen this where people are becoming more informed, either correctly or incorrectly. There's no information is either bad or good. It's no depending how you take it. And people you will say something and then go search it on Google straight away. And now with the advent of AI tools, people literally doing
absolutely.
that as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how the medical field shifts just a little bit in the way clinicians and healthcare providers work with patients because it's going to be very, very different.
Yeah,
And I guess I guess it's a good question to ask, are you seeing this in your training as well? And it's all you're in third year, but the reason I ask these questions because I know when I was teaching at the university, universities were very, 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 very late to bring on the technology into I was actually teaching
yeah.
health informatics. I was teaching health informatics, and in
Oh
health
wow.
informatics, I brought it in, and I was working with clinicians, and they were saying we don't even talk about this with in our learning. Yeah, I guess it's early stages, but is the medical training changing a little bit?
Well, first of all, to reflect back on you, that sounds absolutely awesome that you are leading that health informatics and trying to bring that in because it's really neglected. And your experience that you've just said now sounds really familiar. People are often very hesitant because they feel like they don't have the training or they don't want to face any liability or any backlash if they try and, kind of platform these new technologies or discuss them. They people naturally and it's totally fair because we don't have the training infrastructure in place. People naturally want to stick with the more traditional content. They don't want to bring in newer content. Um, so as I'm sure you can guess from that kind of little rant there, no, there's not a whole lot of it. I don't see it that much in my training. I've seen in pharmacy and in medicine as well, there might be one or two assignments where there is a piece of content generated by ChatGPT, OpenAI, and then students have to go through and kind of mark it and correct it and see if it lines up with existing actual research. So that was really valuable and really interesting to see some of the benefits and see some of the concerns that, AI can basically generate, quote, and reference research that doesn't actually exist, right? So that's definitely a concern moving forward. So that was valuable in the course, but I haven't really seen much beyond that, including in the other clinical programs. So I'm sure it'll naturally start to appear more and more, and that's a good first step that I saw this year with that ChatGPT assignment example. But it's like we're almost treating AI and digital health like it's a choice whether we engage with it, when in reality, we don't get to decide if it's coming or not. It is coming, especially in Aotearoa New Zealand. We're a smaller nation. We're often a little bit behind the curve and always influenced by what's happening in some of the major centers in other countries. So it's not a choice whether it's coming. It is coming. And so we would hope, and I would hope that our medical schools and our clinical curriculums are really building up infrastructure quickly to give training around this, to give support around this, so our future clinicians know how to deal with it and know how to integrate it into their work. I'm not seeing that right now, but maybe it'll come more and more. But AI is something that's here to stay, and it's only going to grow, not only in terms of how we deliver healthcare, but in terms of how patients absorb information or analyze information or compare the advice the doctor gives them to the advice ChatGPT gives them. So it's here to stay, and I really hope that we're in the process of revamping and upgrading our curriculums to really adjust to that reality.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said it because I had a guest a few months ago, and he said to me, he said something really profound. He said, in November 22, whenever it all came out, it came out for the first time. Everyone was on the same level. Everyone
Yeah.
started, apart from the engineers, obviously, but everyone was ground zero. And it goes, but some people that are still at ground zero because they're refusing to accept this as a reality, and the others that are taken away. And the problem
Yes.
is
Yeah.
those that are still at ground zero are the ones that are going to struggle, or the ones that are going to be trying to pull this on that on in the rocket
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
rocket sphere. But that's going to again increase the inequality. We've already got crazy inequalities. This is going to further
Yes,
those
exactly.
inequalities, which is
Yeah.
crazy. So fingers crossed,
Yeah.
at least in the training, it changes quite a bit. And I guess
Yeah.
this is a great segue and into your world and your entrepreneurship world. Here you are going to university to become a medical student, and then you've discovered that you're an entrepreneur. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question because I never ever thought I would do anything related to that sector. And if you asked me probably exactly 1 year ago, I would still never anticipate it, never have any idea of it, not have any plans to ever do it. And so I was kind of shunted along the path, if you will, because it sounds a bit unfortunate because of the lack of resourcing and lack of ability of our existing health and academic systems to kind of use digital health to improve equity. So, what do I mean by that? Basically, I was up in Whangarei during, I think, last summer holidays, and I was shadowing an anesthetist, right? Absolutely fantastic anesthetist, really engaging with patient care. And so I was following him around for a couple weeks over the summer holidays. And I would just see some of the same inefficiencies and problems when it came to how we provide information to patients. So we'd have a patient come in, we'd have a free anesthesia consult where, the doctor and the patient would basically discuss things like lifestyle factors, their smoking, their drinking behaviors, and then do things like an echocardiogram to check their heart before their surgery. And so here was an anesthetist, a really amazingly qualified, a really highly trained individual, and he would be asking, how many beers do you drink in a week? Oh, okay. Typing it up on a computer, trying to calculate the standard alcohol units. How tall are you? How much do you weigh? Oh, yeah. I'm getting out a physical calculator to try and calculate out BMI. And, honestly, wasting his time because there could be such a more efficient system. And then when he had calculated all this out and put it into the form, then turning to the patient and basically saying, in a really respectful and engaging way. But the gist of it was you're this much above the recommended BMI for the clinical recommendation. You need to bring your drinking down this much leading up to a surgery. 2 weeks in advance, you need to make sure that you're quitting smoking and quitting vaping so it doesn't muck with your lungs for the anesthesia. And so I would just slowly see the shock appear on patients' faces as they were put all this information in front of them. And this was often, several weeks out, not that far out from their elective surgery date. So who's going to be able to make these sweeping changes in such a short amount of time? And I was just sitting there thinking, why can't we intervene so much earlier in this process? Why can't we give this information to patients in a really personalized way, in a really easily digestible way, months and months in advance, so it's not sprung on them, right before their elective surgery date is coming up? And I really think, in a way, my relative ignorance was a blessing because I was a young medical student. I was only second year. I didn't know much about surgery, about anesthesia. And so I was sitting here between the doctor and the patient, and I was relating to both. I was relating to the patient, not understanding the full scope of what's going on, being a bit concerned, confused. What are my next steps? What do I do? What's this doctor telling to me with all this fancy language? And I was also completely relating, to my colleague who is, doing his best to deliver patient care, deliver information with the really time constrained, situation he's faced with, trying to make it as easy to understand as possible with, a short consult time and, a long list of patients coming up. And so my ignorance was a blessing in terms of I was sitting between these two people with a foot in both worlds. And so I was able to then kind of spark that idea of why don't I build a platform that can really do this for patients to complement what doctors are already doing, but so they can go home and slowly and surely work through, digest this information, and then get a guided, personalized way to make these changes. And to really answer your original question, how did this end up in a startup space? Is I tried to bring it to the public health system. I brought it to people in Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand. They were really receptive. They were really supportive, but they just acknowledged that it would take 10 years to do this. And it would really be more feasible if you go in a startup foundation first, kind of prove the case of it, prove that it can work and provide these benefits, and then come back to us. So it wasn't my initial plan. I was trying to get it done as, a policy or a reform or just a
Yeah.
kind of funded program to help patients. Um, and I got kind of shunted along by talking to all these people, shunted to a startup space. Um, and then, I'm still doing that, of course, with the dream and the ambition of getting it back to the patients that need it in the most accessible way possible, hopefully in partnership with health systems in Australia and New Zealand. So that's kind of how I ended up on that position. Yeah.
And what I love about that is because, when you think about entrepreneur, any product is created because of this. There's a necessity, and you saw the need right there, sitting there.
Yeah,
And if you were just a patient, you wouldn't have seen it. If you were just a doctor, you wouldn't have seen it, right? It is probably the right time. And if you were a fourth
exactly.
year medical student, you'd be like, "Oh, this is what they're talking about." Whereas second year, you're like, "Oh, I know nothing. I know nothing about nothing, or I know a little about." And when you know a little about something, you don't know everything, which creates that. So it's really
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And I guess for you, what the saving grace for you is, if we had taken this 10 years ago, there would have been no way for you to go. You'd be like, "Cool, this is a great idea. Cool, go and figure it out."
Yeah.
Whereas now you've got the startup space. And what is it like for you? Because um, in the clinical world, you're doing there's set procedures, but the startup
Yeah.
world is a whole different world altogether. And
Exactly.
how did you have to shift your mind when you
Yeah.
step into those different rooms?
That's a really good point. I sometimes have these conversations with other founders who are like, "Oh, you're so lucky, you're young, young founders are really prioritized, Silicon Valley, blah, blah, blah." And I just turn to them and I'm like, in the medical field, no, that's not the case. If if you're older, you're more respected, you're fully a consultant, you have years of clinical experience behind you. That's what people really value. So there have been some challenges in trying to prove my legitimacy. But overall, people are really open-minded because they've seen that I've put in the work to try and really build something. I've done the research. I've collaborated with lots of different people. I've sought advice from lots of different people. Um, Lots of different people who are not only experts in their field, but also patient advocates and people who have gone through it firsthand. So I think when you put in the work and you just bring that forward and really come with a lot of energy, people are receptive to helping you in both fields and they're receptive to working with you or supporting your journey. Um, And you're completely right with your analysis just there, where there's set clinical procedures, and it's that way academically too. All of medical school, and then after that, being a registrar or being a house officer, or even, doing your fellowship and becoming a consultant. It's like a set process that's really laid out for you, and it's been that way for decades and decades and decades, if not more. Um, and so you're not really pivoting, you're not really moving around, you're not really questioning everything. You're kind of, it's amazing because you get these amazing clinical experiences, but you are chugging along a preset path that's really expected and it's really stable and it's always there for you, and it's just the path you're meant to follow. And like you're mentioning, yes, being in the startup zone and the kind of innovation ecosystem, completely different. There is no set path. There's no guarantee of moving to the next step. Um, there's no prescribed, journey that you're meant to follow and different qualifications you get along the way. So it really is a reframing of how you think. But like I was saying before, I've always thought that way in terms of I'm always looking at things outside of the prescribed curriculum that's set to you. So I have found it not too bad and kind of natural to fall into that journey of um building your own pathway. And I think the main the main like crux of that whole thing for me is just talking to people. I literally just go talk to as many people as I can, hear from their journeys, people not as far as me in the journey, people well beyond me, who people have raised capital or people who have gone to the US, gone global, or people who, are really building up a New Zealand health company, like some of the founders at Tend. And so talking to all those people, kind of getting their support, but also just collating the thoughts, the feelings, the experiences they've had. That's really what's, I'd say, reinforced me along my journey.
That's so beautiful because I say it's beautiful because I had Mrinali on here. She's the founder for Eat Kinda last week, and she shared the same thing. She goes, "Hey, it's a huge shift, but it's the shift comes that you've got to have those conversations with people, and you have
Yes.
to
Yeah.
not be afraid that people are going to steal your idea and go, actually, everyone's trying to help you, or most
Yeah.
people are trying to help you, but
I
you have to
think
be able to
especially
ask."
in New Zealand, we're lucky with that. Maybe if there's a different national context, you might be
Exactly.
a bit more wary. But yeah, we're
That's right.
pretty good.
That's so
Yeah.
true. And it's awesome that you have that network opportunity. And yeah, we've spoken about all these amazing highs in your world, but life comes in waves and troughs. What are some of the challenges that you've had? I guess let's narrow it down to maybe this year, because this year I guess is a big year for you. You've had lots happening this year. Some of the challenges that really stand out for you, they go, actually, man, whew, this is challenging.
Yeah, yeah. I guess one of the earliest challenges that I found when building up the startup was basically finding a team. And I don't even mean necessarily like a team of people all being co-founders, all sharing equity, or all being employees. I just mean a team of people around you who are really willing to help with a lot of different things, whether that's technical side like development or IT cybersecurity or just general advice on running a business or, the basic structure of starting a startup in New Zealand. So I'd say that's kind of one of it's like a mandatory hurdle where you've got to find those people before you can really progress. So there were times when I was, basically finding that people and building that team that basically everything just stalled because I wasn't finding the right people. And I honestly don't even have any pieces of advice from that. You've literally just got to find the right people before you can move on. So I would say that's a challenge in the sense of it's just literally a roadblock that without getting through it, you're not going to progress. So that was kind of an earlier roadblock. And then I guess the eternal challenge is time and energy. And sometimes you've got enough time in the day to fit everything you'd love to do. And realistically, you can book everything in and fit everything, but you just don't have the energy to. And so I think that was a challenge. And over the course of the year, I've just kind of tried to evolve my mindset to not overstress myself, but not understress myself either, because it sounds a bit counterintuitive and it doesn't sound like fully in line with all the mental well-being advice we get these days. But I also think if you don't always keep the ball rolling or if you neglect things, the stress can just compound later. So
Yeah.
I think just having that healthy balance of keeping the momentum so you don't get disillusioned or demotivated, not overstacking yourself, and not putting too much pressure on yourself, but just keeping that momentum going and surrounding yourself by people who motivate you. That was probably, again, a mandatory step that I had to make to get over those challenges of being overstressed or not having enough time or not enough energy, you kind of have to set that foundation. So obviously not perfect, still having days where I'm just like, screw it, I'm not going to reply to any emails, no matter how important they are. I'm just too tired. So you have to kind of strike that balance, and it's an ongoing journey to get through that challenge.
Yeah, those two things are really powerful, because as you said before, finding people that align with you, and not just technically and all that kind of stuff, it's just align with
Yes.
you as a human being is always a
Yeah.
challenge. And that's always the hard thing. But the second one is actually even more interesting because, as you said, in the mental health conversation, we talk about reducing stress. But I always challenge people that come to that. I was like, but having healthy stress is having some stress in your life is really
Yes.
important. Is very important. If
Yeah.
we reduce all stress, then what are we doing? We're just sitting there, like, as
Yeah,
you
at
said,
some
just
point you're just
thinking.
sitting there scrolling TikTok or scrolling Instagram Reels.
Yeah.
Like you need a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
need a bit of stress. And the analogy is always like if you want to get health, if you want to grow muscle, you have to stress the muscle.
Yeah.
If you want to do stuff, there's some stress for it to happen. If you want to move a car needs an acceleration of the stress for it to move forward. So I think,
Exactly.
I challenge people like, oh, I'm too stressed. Like, let's talk about your stresses. And actually, those are just normal life things. Some things are important to have in life, but then it's when you overstress that you go, okay, now
Yes.
where's that line there? And talking about that there, because this is great, is how do you look after yourself, Rim? How do you actually take time for yourself? Because people that are founders and studying at the same time, life happens, and then you forget about you sometimes,
Yeah.
and all that
Yeah.
crazy. What does your running time look like?
Yeah. I would just preface all of that by
Yeah.
saying I've always known that I've wanted to try and make as much impact as I can and try and make as much change as I can. So even when it is a day where I might feel more stressed or I'm like, oh, this is so many things to have to do, when I step back, I'm actually immensely grateful because
Yeah.
I would so much rather this than, being left with nothing or, not having all of these kind of dreams unfolding. So I'm honestly immensely grateful. So I think just reflecting and having that mindset of being thankful for all that you have, all the privileges and opportunities that you might have at any given moment, that that is a bit of me time and it is basically acknowledging, wow, I'm watching me live the dream a little bit. Like I'm watching this progress make that I've always wanted to do. But aside from that, you know, spending years growing up in Whangarei, um, I just have always loved nature. I've always loved green spaces. I've always loved the ocean. So I think really that was a big struggle in first year, coming to Auckland, in a kind of a really jam-packed apartment area with a lot of, like empire apartment building around you. I remember just coming up to Whangarei one of the holidays and I felt like my eyes being just like watering because of all the green I was seeing. And so I think that kind of proved to me in first year. As a kid, I thought I wouldn't care that much, but actually it's really beautiful to have natural spaces around you. So, I always go on walks with my friends, walks with mates, hikes along the ocean. We drive up to Mangawhai or sometimes we drive up all the way to Whangarei from Auckland. Um, and then I also just do your kind of stock standard going to the gym, going for runs, that kind of keeps me not going insane each day. I find that if I were to just be inside doing work all day, I kind of lose track of everything. So I definitely break it up by exercise and that kind of thing. Um, and then I think integrating it with your friend group is great. Like I
Yeah.
share my goals with my friends. We discuss things, we make vision boards for what we want the next year to look like. And that's really fun and really motivating. So that's kind of how I'm taking care of myself throughout each week. Yeah.
And I like that because, the one that I really like about that is the fact when you step back and you look back at what the stress was and you go, this is actually really awesome because the
Yeah.
stress is into something that's greater than the actual stressful moment. It's a bigger picture,
Yeah.
which is very, very different to a stress of writing a report for somebody else because that's very, very different. But
Exactly. Yeah.
where you go, actually, wait a minute, I'm doing this here because it's purpose driven stuff there, which is really beautiful. I had a laugh with you when you were talking about Auckland and Whangarei because, as you know, I just recently moved to Auckland a few months ago,
Yeah.
and I'm now in Dunedin when I'm recording this podcast here, and just looking out and seeing the green, I'm like, ah, this is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
I'm walking in the center, the city. I'm like, oh my goodness, where's the green? And you go to
Yeah.
Albert Park, and I
Yeah.
was like, this is not green. This is just
It doesn't cut it, right? It does not cut it. Yeah.
it's so crazy. It's so crazy. But hey, the cool thing for you at University of Auckland, you've got that awesome, beautiful gym now, which is amazing. What an amazing facility if you've
I
been to
actually
it yet.
haven't been yet, but I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
I'm pretty envious. It's pretty beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. It looks it
So
looks really fancy. Yeah.
it's a great space there. But what I loved there was the fact that hey, it's again, the last bit there was sharing a goal with other people. Again, no, lots of people in the world just keep stuff to themselves because again they're afraid of oh, whatever, judgment or whatever. But when you share your goals, it
Yeah,
actually subconsciously you want to now start achieving those goals there because you shared it with a
yeah,
group of people,
yeah, for
which
sure.
which
And you're no longer walking that path alone. You're now
yeah.
people know about it. They're kind of sharing it in the same emotionality of the journey. So it's not like you're just kind of holding it to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really, really beautiful. And I guess now I'm gonna bring in a personal aspect. What has it been for your family watching you do this year? Because again, they live in Whangarei, you're in Auckland, and you're doing all these awesome things here. What is it like for your family watching you as a young person doing this, but also
Yeah.
from a point of care? Maybe you've never asked them this question.
So from a point of care,
From point of care, when they see you doing all these crazy cool things
interesting.
here, and like mom and dad are like, actually, oh poor boy, or actually this is amazing.
To be honest, when I was going through first year, I didn't get too much of that. They were more like,
Yeah,
we believe in you and you can do this. And, they were basically saying work hard now, so you don't have to work hard for
exact.
3 years. So I don't
Yeah,
want to make it sound toxic at all because it's not, and it really
it's the
helped
right
me.
way.
But
Yep, totally. Yeah, totally.
yeah, they were definitely supporting me and boosting me along. Um, Honestly, like my sister's also at the University of Auckland, and I just want to give her a shout out because she's absolutely amazing as well. She is now in her second year or completed it of engineering. She's doing mechatronics engineering. She has an internship with Halter, which is a huge New Zealand startup that's now gone to the US and whatnot. So she's really highly motivated and involved. And we often just sit together and talk about things, talk about what our next steps are, motivate each other. So I feel like we never really tell each other to slow down. We're more telling each other to keep going. But it's also nice because, often we'll just go for a drive around, chat about anything else. And so I think it's that mix of having people who inspire you, but also you can just chill with and, they understand you. So there's no social pressure going on. And so my sister and my family, I really lean on them as well. And so, point of care, I guess I don't know how consciously they're engaging in a point of care, but it is what it is, and it is a point of care because it's really awesome to have them there and have them supporting. So, yeah, and having my sister down in Auckland is also great.
Makes a big difference, right? People make a big difference. And again,
Exactly.
the theme here for me is this community, whether that is helping other people or your family or friends. I think that's a theme that's
Yeah,
really, really, really prevalent right here from
yeah.
what I'm seeing in this conversation, which is really cool. Talking about community, what is it like for you presenting at Hens? And I talk about this because many, 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 many years ago I presented at Hens and I had an interesting response because
Okay,
I was challenging status quo at that time there.
interesting.
But I'd love to know what your experience is
I'll
like.
have to ask you more in depth on that after this,
Yeah,
but
no, sure, totally.
yeah, yeah. So Hens was really interesting because I had on LinkedIn, I had already had some connections to some of the keynote speakers who are arriving in advance. And so they actually came to Auckland and just out of the blue messaged me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, do you want to meet up and stuff?"
Amazing.
And, they're from the UAE. So, coming from Dubai, just arriving in Auckland. So we actually hung out for a couple days beforehand. And so I really didn't have much connections or know many people at Hens, but I was already hanging out with them, so it felt like I was going in with a bunch of mates. And so it was really enjoyable speaking there. And honestly, interesting response. I don't think I was saying anything too controversial, so I probably didn't get the same riling up that you might have experienced. But I just really did appreciate it. Because you don't really see many other students there. You don't see many medical students or students in any other specialties of any other degree there. So I was grateful that people didn't kind of shrug me off as, oh, here's this, young kid who really doesn't know much of anything, doesn't have much career experience, doesn't have much lifelong dedication to this field. Who cares what he's saying? I really appreciate that people listened and they engaged. And, afterwards, I had people coming up to me asking me questions about the research I had done and about my journey building the startup with SurgReady. And so I really value that there are these people, in their 40s, 50s, 60s with a lot of portfolios of experience who are coming to me almost as an equal and, asking questions, engaging with me. I was really, really grateful for that. And on top of that, I also facilitated a session with a couple other speakers. And I think when I first was sitting there, and I was asking them, "Oh, what's your name? How long do you speak for? Blah blah." I think they were like looking at me a bit inquisitively, like, "Why are you asking this? Like, what are you on about?" And then I said, "Okay, I'll be facilitating you guys today." And they're kind of like, "Oh, we did not, I did not clock you to be the person who'd be facilitating." So there was a bit of, I'm sure people didn't assume I was gonna be speaking there or gonna be really trying to engage at the highest capacity, but I'm glad that once people saw I was, delivering my talk or facilitating, they just treated me on an equal level and really listened to what I had to say. And I really engaged with them, listened to their speeches and asked them really, the best pertinent questions I could after facilitating. So I really hope that people take away from it, give young people more opportunities, get them more involved in these organizations and these conferences, give them speaking opportunities because they'll rise to the challenge, they'll be able to operate at the level anyone else can. And it also builds the multi-generational strength of any organization. Imagine if Hens had heaps of students there, heaps of young entrepreneurs or young innovators or people in any field, nursing, medicine, anything. That's going to, build a strong multi-generational future for Hens. So I would love to see more organizations doing that in New Zealand. And I was glad to be in the room and I was glad to be treated as an equal in that room.
I think the beauty about that is because it works both ways. You get to talk, but you get listened to, but you also get challenged as well,
Yes.
and through challenge comes your own depth of growth. So it's really awesome to hear that you had that experience. But also, I mean, everyone that listens to my podcast knows I just rant on and on about LinkedIn because I think it's such a great platform. But just the power of that personal connection changes the world dramatically for you.
Yes. Yeah,
You would not have met those people if you're not connecting on
exactly.
LinkedIn, and there'd be a
Yeah,
whole different conversation that would have happened. So
exactly.
it's, and I'm just going to put out there, the power of those networks, if you use them correctly, is again, it's about people and community.
For
And
sure.
and and we live in a world now where we're not defined by the boundaries of where we live. We live in a
Yeah.
world where our boundaries have disappeared, and
Yeah.
I can click with anyone anywhere as we are at the
Yeah.
moment right now, which is really beautiful. Um, we haven't really touched on your product, SurgReady. Do you want to just talk a little bit about it, and then because I know it's still in its
Yes.
commercially
Yeah.
sensitive stages, so just what is the premise of the product? I guess and you have already mentioned that before, but what's your driving passion for that there?
Yeah. So this is kind of where I'm going to launch into a bit of the spiel, but it's also just the authentic journey that I really, really did have building the product so far. So what SurgReady is really aiming to do is be a personalized guide for patients in the months leading up to their elective surgeries. So, you might have a date for your upcoming knee replacement or hip replacement or some other elective surgery that's coming up later in the year. And instead of basically leaving patients kind of just drifting alone and, maybe getting one or two phone calls from a nurse or from your surgeon, and then, coming in right before for a consult and then boom, you're having your surgery, what it really is aiming to do is provide a constant companion and a constant kind of source for people to go through from the comfort of their own homes. So part of our component is providing that information, that education in a really easily digestible way. And the other part is customized, personally adapted rehabilitation platform. So that's a long word, rehabilitation. It's basically rehabilitation, but before the event. So it's getting people fit and prepared for their surgeries. And this is honestly a statistic that I can barely believe, even though I've seen the research on it. But about 45% of elective orthopedic surgeries in New Zealand are cancelled. And that's almost half of surgeries being cancelled.
Wow. Yeah.
If it happened with McDonald's orders, there'd probably be riots in the street, right? If every second McDonald's order was cancelled. So, and a lot of those cancellations are because patients aren't given the support and the time to adequately prepare, whether that's stopping smoking and vaping, reducing BMI, stopping and starting the medications at the correct times, being reminded when to stop a particular medication, um, all these things that are difficult to keep track of, and that we don't have a good system to remind and reinforce. So part of what we're integrating at SurgReady is a prehabilitation course that provides personalized goals that patients can follow in terms of reducing alcohol consumption, reducing smoking, and improving diet and weight loss. And so all those factors make it more likely for people to have safe outcomes with less post-operative complications. they're less likely to get cancelled or delayed in their surgery. Because, if you aren't prepared, the surgeon might just look at you on the day, assess you and say, or the anesthetist might say, we can't do it. So it's avoiding that, but it's also then trying to promote that lifelong healthy lifestyle change because surgeries really are an amazing focal point to do that because you're kind of faced with a really strict deadline. You've got a set number of time to make this big change, and it's a really pivotal event in people's lives. And so it's really a chance for us to make lifelong healthy lifestyle changes and really improve people's lives in the long run. So it's basically this all-encompassing platform that tries to address all of these factors in preparation for surgery. And then that also includes stuff like we're currently building up exercise schemes which are automatically tailored to what the patient is experiencing. So say you've got pain in your right leg or low mobility, then we're generating exercise schemes that are going to provide regimens for you to be as prepared as you can be with the challenges you might be facing. And then, a faster return to mobility, less stays in hospital beds after the surgery. And so we're just trying to improve that perioperative, that around the operation care.
I love that, and I love that because the excitement that you have there is so tangible. Even though we're on a Zoom, just the
Yeah,
tangibleness is so beautiful, and it's really interesting. To me, it just seems like it's logic, and the reason I say it's
yeah,
logic is because if you think about anyone that wants to run a half marathon or a marathon, they download an app, they go, the marathon date is whatever day, and then it builds a
yeah,
plan. It builds a plan.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
you don't just go, I'm going to run 26 kilometers tomorrow or in 3 weeks time,
exactly.
So, it's really, and also what
Yeah,
what you have just mentioned are things that are lifestyle habits that have come over time. And how do you expect a patient to stop smoking in 4 weeks if they've been doing
yeah,
it for 20 years of their life, right? So it's
exactly.
a real amazing product. I'm really glad that someone
Yeah,
is looking at that because as you said, it's not just get it done, it's after surgery, boom,
exactly.
this is actually because if you
Yeah,
have a long lead in time of change, the outcome is going to be better in so many different ways. So really grateful.
exactly.
What a great product.
And the research really does show that compared to just a normal weight loss program or a normal diet improvement program, when prehabilitation is tied to that surgical deadline, we see a lot better outcomes and a lot better adherence where people
Yeah.
are really trying to make those changes because they feel an impending doom if I don't want to
Yeah.
make it scary because you really want to be as best prepared as you can be. And, I'm bringing in community once again, as I always do. But one of the core parts of the program that we're building up now is peer support groups for these surgical journeys. So we're getting a bunch of people who are all going through the same type of surgery or preparing for that same type of surgery. We're getting someone who's been through that surgery before to ask any burning questions. And then we're just getting one clinician, an experienced doctor, to mediate that conversation. And so we're having these aiming to build these peer support circles where people can really bounce off each other, motivate each other to stay online with their program, but also share their experiences, share their tips and tricks, and just build that sense of community because there's also the psychological and the mental well-being component to good health. So that's probably one of the features I'm most excited about is the peer support groups we are building up now, which is also going to be in-house on the platform. But yeah, I'm really excited to see that we can prove what community can do for medical outcomes.
I love that. That is so cool. And again, community comes into play, which which is really beautiful. That seems to be your strength, in other words as well, in other aspects. I mean, this is great. I'm not going to delve into that there. I'm going to just work on the community angle just a little bit. So fantastic product. Look forward to seeing what happens with that there. So for those of you
Yeah,
that are
I'll keep
not
you
that are
updated.
interested, yeah, we'll put the website or the link on this so people can follow on the journey there. But the last bit of community that I'm going to talk about is getting involved in the Asia New Zealand Leadership Network. What prompted you to apply for that as well? And that is a really awesome network. I mean, some really cool people there. Um, and how do you see that has changed a bit of your thinking or actually grown your thinking?
Yeah, yeah. So what I find really interesting about the Asian New Zealand Leadership Network and the overall foundation is just the huge variety of people and fields that are involved. So there are some people who are business people and exporters who are exporting to Asian countries. And so they want to deepen their connections, deepen their networking, and understand the markets that they're selling to. There are other people who are humanitarian lawyers or refugee advocates who want to build safeguards for refugees who are often displaced across the Asia Pacific particularly from Afghanistan or from Myanmar, often coming to Australia, New Zealand. So I just like I went to the onboarding day, and I already learned so much in that single day because everyone there has, such a level of expertise and passion about what they're doing. And I think that is what I was really seeking out in the foundation and the leadership network. Everyone there was so inspiring, so motivating. And even like recently, as a couple of weeks ago, I've talked to people from there about totally unrelated things, maybe things about legal dimensions of the startup or, just other topics to discuss. But we were really drawn together because it is such an amazing platform. And the people there are just, absolutely inspiring. And so I think, Aotearoa New Zealand, where we are positioned in the Asia Pacific. We are positioned, closer to China than the West. And so I sometimes find it funny when people try and antagonize those dynamics or try and, characterize us almost outside of the region that we're in, but it is the region that we're in. I was actually born in the US and my family moved to New Zealand from there. But we're obviously closer to China than the US. And so I think I would like to see more balance in how Aotearoa New Zealand positions itself. And I think we have a lot to learn from every country and the medical field in every country, the state of health innovation in every country around the world. And I went to a perioperative symposium a couple months ago, and probably one of the most valuable talks there was a gentleman from Singapore who ran a perioperative clinic in one of the major hospitals in Singapore. And I feel that we often just assume we've got to draw from the UK. We've got to draw from Britain. We have such a similar health system. We're based on them, similar culture, blah, blah, blah. We can only learn from them. Like, no, in reality, we should be learning from Singapore. We should be learning from Vietnam. We should be learning from China or the US or anywhere that provides, because everyone's providing valuable innovations in a completely different way. And so I really hope to see the influence of the foundation grow in terms of New Zealand should be connected to, should be giving to, and should be receiving ideas and receiving inspiration from every country across the Asia Pacific, and not just defaulting to the UK as the model that we need to take our advancements and take our clues from. And I think we are moving in that direction. I'm just glad to be a part of that network.
That's really awesome. And again, it's a celebration, the fact that you actually applied for the program and you've got on the program and you can see the greater good, not just for yourself, but where New Zealand and the healthcare system can go. Really, really beautiful. Ronan, we've been speaking for almost an hour, and it's been just really beautiful. And I don't want to take up your time because I know time is precious. So I'm gonna wrap up the conversation and we can keep talking after the podcast if you'd like. But there's so much I've learned from you today. So much just about you as a young person, but the passion, the hard work, the ethos, but all driven around purpose and passion and community
Absolutely.
and a purpose around life, as opposed to just living life according to prescription, but pushing past the prescription in terms of clinical conversations. I guess my last question for you, not I guess, I know my last question is every week we invite people onto a podcast to share a piece of knowledge. It's called Baskets of Knowledge. We'd love you to share a piece of knowledge to put into our basket, and that can come from any aspect of your life.
That's a hard challenge to finish on because I'm trying to think of, I've learned so much recently that I'm trying to think of the best piece of information to pass on. I think what I've just personally been reflecting on, and it's less a piece of knowledge and more just something I'd love for everyone to do, is try and pass apart what is external to you and what's internal to you. And I'm kind of piggybacking off what Rajesh said at the beginning of this episode, which is figure out your internal perspective because it won't just help you understand where you're going and what you really want to pursue, but it'll also help you understand that everyone has their own internal perspective they're coming from, and it'll help you navigate interactions with people, whether that's arguments or collaborations. And so I guess my piece of information is more like a piece of encouragement where find, what makes you happy, find what is being kind of imposed on you externally versus what you're really authentically drawn to and just really pursue that. That's something I'm trying to do right now. I'm no expert at it. I'm trying to build towards that, but that's kind of the piece I'd love to pass on in this basket of knowledge that you've built up.
I love this so
I
much,
love
Rona,
this.
because do you know why? Because lots of times we're living a life imposed to us, other people. And I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago, I wrote, say, a LinkedIn article about are your beliefs actually your beliefs? Because a
Yes.
lot of the times
Yes.
they are not our beliefs, they are beliefs that impose on others. So I love,
Yeah.
actually, your piece of knowledge is really beautiful because it takes time for you to stop and go, am I living life on my terms? Am I living life
Yeah.
on someone else's terms? What is authentically me versus what is not authentically me? So that is a really beautiful piece of
Absolutely.
knowledge to put into your basket. And I guess this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of layers being unpeeled and sometimes emotionals being unpeeled and letting go of things that are, oh, wait a minute, I thought this was part of my life, but not part of my life. So beautiful. And it's really powerful because it is something that is an ongoing journey. And, we'll go to that day. So thank you so much, Ronan.
Amazing pleasure. Kia ora. Thank you so much for having me
No
on.
worries. Thank you for jumping on. For those of you that have listened for the first time, hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast. If you haven't, go back and listen again because I'm sure you've missed something really beautiful. For those of you that have been on here for many, many times, hopefully you've enjoyed this as well. And please share, like, or comment on this podcast because we think that all our guests, Ronan is one of them today, share something that can be applied to any parts of your life. So have a listen, have a share, and don't forget to comment. Till next time, don't forget to be safe, keep smiling, and don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. Ka kite, everybody. Peace. Thanks, Ronan.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.